Brought to you by Sip for Your Cause.
Hello, and welcome to Let's Talk Nonprofits. Again, a show where we talk about those things that are taking place in the nonprofit sector, but specifically to increase the awareness, the funding, the sustainability, and ultimately the impact of nonprofit organizations. And we do that by having discussions with those who operate in that space. So today is no different. We want to thank our sponsors for providing us the opportunity to be here to continue to share great content. We appreciate sipforyourcause.org. Ask that you visit them at www.sipforyourcause.org. Thank you. I want to introduce Ms. Glenda Hicks here today, and welcome, Glenda.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Well, let me tell you, we've been trying to get together, and we're glad that it finally happened. I am so excited to have you today. It was great meeting you. I still remember the day and the time you were sitting on my left side. Okay, so tell you, I specifically.
Great memory.
Yes,
great memory.
But we had great conversations at that time, and we're looking further to discuss that today. But before we get into all of that, tell them, who is Glenda Hicks?
Oh, wow. Do we have that much time?
All the time you want. Just be sure to stop when the director tells us so.
Okay, will do. Well, thank you, Nash. I'm very happy to be here today with you. And I am a certified public accountant. I've been in the profession about 28 years and have a practice in Marietta. And for the past 16 years, I've been operating that practice and have been serving the nonprofit community. So I am happy to say I am a Florida State alum, which doesn't go over too well here in Georgia, but go Noles anyway. And, I just love serving my community, helping to build stronger nonprofits, and assisting however I might be able to with the skill set and training and education that I have.
Yeah, and I tell you, when I first met Glenda and heard the background and experience, I couldn't wait to extend the invitation for her to come and share. I think your unique combination of past experience with what you've combined to introduce to the nonprofit space, I think is beneficial. And so we want to make sure as many nonprofit organizations and those in that space have an opportunity to learn about Glenda Hicks.
Well, I thank you for the opportunity. I'm very excited to be here and to converse with you.
Thank you very much. Well, I want to find out, why did you choose, again, you're talking about CPA.
Yes,
okay?
Yes.
And that's what got me when we first met.
Yes.
CPAs, and we know traditionally what that encompasses.
Mm-hmm.
But you took that and you chose to focus on nonprofits exclusively.
Yes.
Help us understand why.
Okay. Well, it is a bit unusual to have transitioned in the space that I have with a CPA degree, license, and accounting degree. But I decided after I had worked for other companies and businesses at one point that it was time for me to start my own.
Okay.
And in doing that, literally every single referral that I received was a nonprofit organization.
Okay.
So in the beginning, it wasn't intentional.
Okay.
It was because people I knew had some affiliation with an organization that happened to be a nonprofit. And when I worked for others, they were for-profit as well as nonprofit, and I got an opportunity to see both sides. But the last few companies I worked for happened to all be nonprofit, and I guess that was a design greater than my plans that I gained that experience so that I could later stay in that space intentionally.
It reminds me of when we were in the growing stages, and we're still in the growing stages, but the earlier growing stages of BizLink's TV network and the consulting group. When we were asked, well, who is your ideal client? And, we would come up and we tried to give the ideal client description. Then eventually, we said, well, let's look who we've been serving.
Oh, yes.
And that is our ideal client. So to hear you say that you end up working in the nonprofit space, but because that's who we're coming to. That's where.
Right.
And so I failed to share with you that on this show we do share nuggets, and that is one of the nuggets we're going to pull out right now, guys. We're going to share. Sometimes you have your concept, your idea, but sometimes, you know, you need to go with the flow,
Yes.
because that flow will tend to bring you more reward,
That's
you
right.
know, financially, revenue, and otherwise, than you trying to go down a different way.
Exactly.
And so I like you saying and acknowledging that by design,
Mm-hmm.
you know, we need to be sensitive to that. So that's our first nugget
Right.
of the day, that as you're beginning your business, and again, you know, on this show, we look at nonprofits and we continue to expound upon the fact that nonprofits are businesses, and
Yes.
you need to operate that way. So as you begin to operate your nonprofit organization, be sensitive to that. Where is it naturally flowing, and take advantage of that. Would you?
Absolutely. I absolutely agree. When you force things, they tend to counteract what
Yeah.
is really inside you. And for me, I always had a passion for giving and helping others. And I just didn't realize that was going to translate into serving the nonprofit community intentionally.
Yeah.
But I always felt there was more. Even at my previous employers, I kept feeling there's something more I'm supposed to do and give. And this is how it manifested itself.
Very good.
And so I agree with what you've just said wholeheartedly.
Okay, very good. Now, you've heard what she does, and you've heard her background, but what services do you provide?
Well, interestingly enough, I focus more on board governance
Okay.
than the financial component.
Yeah.
The first, I guess I would say 12 years or so of my firm, I was traditional accounting,
Okay.
number crunching, helping with budgets, finance department. But in that process, I saw that there was a greater need for infrastructure change, and that needed to come from the top. And the top in a nonprofit is the board of directors. And so I intentionally gravitated into that space and started moving away from the traditional accounting work. So I still offer services in finance as it relates to best practices and structure, policies, procedures, and things of that nature, helping board members understand finances of nonprofit organizations, but then also training boards on how to be more effective. So my services focus on board governance and financial management and leadership.
Well, let me ask you about that.
Okay.
Let's delve a little deeper with that.
Okay.
First of all, with the experience that I've had around in the nonprofit sector, I definitely understand the need. Okay, you know, but knowing that you traditionally number crunched,
Yes.
you know, but why the governance and board governance and the financial management?
Well, for me, I'm one of those people that when I make a decision, it's hard for me to deviate from that,
Okay.
whether that's good or bad.
Right.
So I
right.
stuck to accounting all those years in college when I wanted to change career
Wow.
majors sometimes because it was challenging.
Yeah.
I went through the challenge of getting my license, and I just felt I had to stay here.
Gotcha.
So I allowed myself to venture into board governance, but I still do not feel like I can walk away from what I trained all my
Okay.
life for.
Okay.
So I want to stay in that space. I understand that
Yeah.
space. I know there's a need for others to understand the finances better. And I'm just not going to give up my license that
Right,
easily.
right,
It took too long and hard to get it.
Right.
But the governance piece is because it really, as they say, the tone starts at the top. And if you don't have a board that really understands what their role and
Yeah.
responsibility is and how everything trickles down from there, then all manner of things will go awry in the organization. And you'll find these directors who are very frustrated and stressed and overwhelmed and feeling like they can't do what they're supposed to as effectively as they should.
Okay.
And they'll look to the board and say, where are you? Why aren't you supporting me? Why aren't you coming to meetings? Why aren't you helping me meet people in the community to connect? And so in the end, I see that in the finance department. As strange as that sounds, I always purport that everything flows through the finance department eventually. Whether you're hiring, firing, writing for a grant, managing a grant, processing payroll, paying a vendor, it's going to go through finance. And so that's how I got to see so much of the agency. And from that, I then determined that the board had a lot to do with the ills of the agency, not necessarily any given department or manager or the director, but the board. And not because they weren't capable, competent, or willing,
Yeah.
they just didn't know.
So, is there a particular size nonprofit that you work with? I mean,
Historically, they've been smaller, local, medium-sized organizations. I have had a few that were multi-million-dollar nonprofit organizations, but in terms of the need, the ones that are smaller, medium-sized, tend to have the greatest need.
And and that's what I was wondering, because we've had on the show the range of startups to the multi-million-dollar and national. So, and listening to you say what you were saying about the board governors, just depending on where those organizations are in terms of longevity or experience. So, my question is, so do you work with with startups?
I haven't
Okay.
to date.
Okay.
I've aligned with a couple of organizations whose focus is working with startups, and so I suspect I will do more of that going forward. But startups are just as challenged as other organizations in some of the same disciplines, and that includes funding.
Okay.
And so a lot of times they're not in a position to pay for what they need. And that's actually one of the reasons I focus so much on training and not just consulting.
Okay.
Because if you have a large room of folks paying a fee, I can still cover my costs and make a living, but make it affordable to organizations who perhaps can't contract for one-on-one consulting.
Yes, makes sense.
And so that gives them an opportunity to come and learn how to do it and where to start and what they should do, and work towards a goal of getting themselves in a position to maybe get one-on-one consulting.
Okay.
But it's critical for startups because they'll close quickly
Yeah.
if they don't find out what they need to know and do it correctly.
And when you were describing the characteristics of the boards, and in particular when I heard you say, the executive directors looking around like, well, where are you? Where don't you come to meetings? It put me in the mind of what I hear a lot of startups going through. And in fact, if you don't mind, I want to go back to that whole concept of the board governance, and because you said something earlier about, that it's not always because the skill set is lacking.
Right.
But I want to focus on, because a lot of startups that I've come in contact with, people realize, oh, okay, I got to have a board to be a nonprofit. And then the way they go about selecting a board.
Yes.
I would like for you to share with the viewers, your recommended process for selecting a board.
Okay.
And identifying who they are or should be.
Okay. Well, first let me say that there is a difference. And I did say what you heard, which was the skill set. It's not necessarily because they don't have the skill set. When you're a startup, a lot of times it is because they don't have the skill set. A lot of startups reach for their family, their friends, their relatives to help them get it started because they're vested in the mission.
Right.
They want to help their friend and family member. But then you get to a point where now it is it's always been, but it becomes even more about the agency, its sustainability, and its growth. And the family and friends you picked because they bought into your mission, not necessarily because they were bankers, accountants, fundraisers, program deliverers, and the like. And now you're at a point where you don't know how to find those people. And you're running and providing your service, and now you've also got to focus on infrastructure, which is why it's so important as a startup to address these things first and then open your doors, so to speak. So when we talk about building a board, I actually have a training on that, and we focus on 9 steps. But for the most part, it's really, first of all, recognizing it's a year-round function. You don't just look for someone when someone else is about to roll off. You maintain a short list of folks that you've already been courting and vetting to see if there's a match between what they're looking to do and what your needs are, so that when you're ready, they're ready to just slide right in. But then you also do what we call a gaps assessment. So you look at what you have and what you need, and then you compare that. And then the gap is what you go after. And so the question becomes, well, where are they? Well, it depends on what you need. So you might look at professional associations, accounting associations, banking associations, real estate associations, fundraising groups, and begin to see who you know that's a member of those groups and see who they know, and then start working those networks and casting that net based on who knows whom, and begin to have conversations, meet them, invite them to an event or activity, share information about your organization with them, find out who they are, what they do, what they're interested in, who they know.
Yes.
Because at the end of the day, board members each need to make a contribution.
Yeah.
And need to help you bring in more contributions.
Very good.
So, not to enumerate all the steps, that's kind of it in a nutshell, which is being intentional.
Very good. I thank you for that, and I that is one of the best answers to that question that I think we've had on the show, and
Thank you.
without me having to phrase it the way that I would traditionally do so, but I really appreciate that. Guys, that's a great nugget. That's the second for the day in terms of selecting your board. Understand that you need to think about sustainability. You need to think about the infrastructure as you begin to build. So we're going to take a break right now as we come to the time to recognize our sponsors and to thank them. We ask that you would support them. Please support them. And we look forward to seeing you after the break.
What happens when soldiers come home? Brenau Foundation offers hero support to ensure that our heroes abroad can continue to be heroes at home. We link veterans with organizations who are dedicated to guiding the transition from military hero to civilian hero. If you want to find out how you can support our troops at home, please contact the Brenau Foundation or visit Brenau.com.
Does your son need a more challenging, focused, and encouraging educational environment? Renaissance Christian Academy is an affordable private school for boys located in McDonough, Georgia, with certified teachers that are uniquely equipped to help your son master learning. You're welcome to schedule a tour of our facilities by calling 770-305-9881 or by visiting our website at rcaboysacademy.org. Renaissance Christian Academy, developing young men to be great leaders through Christ-centered learning.
Welcome back, and again, we do thank all of our sponsors and advertisers for supporting Let's Talk Nonprofits. We would like to continue with Ms. Glenda Hicks, who has been very, 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 very knowledgeable and sharing a wealth of information with us. And before we get back into sharing, I want to just go back where you were talking about the idea that board selection is an ongoing process as you're around, and you talked about to always create keep a short list that people can choose from. I just want to go back to this reference that, again, I'm big on nonprofits understanding that you're a business, and that is one of the tactics and strategies and aspects of business is keeping your funnel full, usually of customers and those type of things. But that's critical. That's the other nugget I want you to take, I guess the third nugget to take away with you as you're trying to, even after your board is in place, and even if they're functioning, and I'll leave this for you to clarify, but if they're functioning well, you still keep a short list.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So even if your board is functioning well, stay active in keeping a good, clean, valuable short list. And again, we're going to refer to that as we do in business as your lead generation and keep your funnels full. So I thank you for bringing that out.
Sure, absolutely.
We want to continue and getting great information from Glenda, and we're going to go back and let's just ask you this.
Okay.
What do you think is one of the greatest areas of need for nonprofits?
Well, from my perspective, again, it goes back to that leadership at the board level.
Okay.
When you talk to nonprofits, they will often tell you their greatest need is money,
Yes.
financing,
Yes.
funding. And they do struggle with fundraising because there's so many nonprofits and they're all vying after the same donors. But you can do it. You can garner the funding that you need based on your mission and your outcomes. What are you doing to move the needle? How are you achieving success? And all of that comes back to your messaging, your goals, your infrastructure. How is the board addressing policy that directs the organization?
Okay.
So for me, the most important thing is making sure you have a strong board that's functioning.
Right.
And we talk about different stages that boards go through in their development. They could be dysfunctional, functional, compliant, or exceptional. So we really want them to be exceptional, which means they're not focused on the traditional agenda of a board meeting and the traditional committee reports that come to a board meeting. A lot of those things can be approved in a consent agenda, where they go out in advance, you look at them, you approve them, and you don't even discuss them in detail. But you talk about what really matters about the agency. What are its exposures? What are the risks out there? What are the strategies it should be pursuing?
You talk like it's a business.
I know that's rhetorical, but yes, it's actually a business. And many nonprofits get themselves in the bind that they're in because the board is what we say, they should maintain their focus at 30,000 feet.
Okay.
And all too often they dive down and they stay down there in the weeds. We want you to dive down if something deserves further investigation, but then come back up to the 30,000 foot level and lead the organization into the future to, again, ensure that it's sustainable after your service on the board. Because we talk about the roles of board members, duty of care, duty of loyalty, duty of obedience, but within that duty of loyalty, it's to make sure the agency sustains your time on the board. So it's not about you as much as what you can bring to the board. And so if you can get the leadership, meaning the board chair, to steer the ship and not have the director take on so much of that work. Because, and this is a really long answer to your short question.
But let me tell you, it may be long, but I'm listening and I haven't interrupted because it's filled with good, useful, needed information.
Thank you.
So
It's all related.
Yeah,
it all
very.
keeps rippling out. And what I see is, when I talk about the director frustration, what many people don't realize is the board has one employee, and that's the executive director. That is the only person who reports to the board. So when you have the director telling you you're not pulling your weight, why aren't you at the meeting? Why aren't you helping me get more leads for donors? It's very uncomfortable. And they should not be put in that position. And so the director ends up carrying a lot of the weight that the chair should carry, or other committee chairs, or the officers, so that the board is holding itself accountable for what it did or did not accomplish. Then it can hold the director accountable in his or her performance review.
Wow. Glenda, that's profound. And I say profound in the way you just made it clear. I mean, you just pulled that onion back clearly and you got down to the source of what board governance and leadership is truly about. And again, and I say that from my own perspective, that again, I have a business mindset when I think about nonprofits, and to hear you describe what you describe, it's a business. It's a well-functioning business. It's where we talk about that as the leader of the company, you need to be working on the business and not in it.
Right.
Right. And then you empower and create a structure sufficient enough for those who are working in it to do what they,
Absolutely.
And so for you to say, and really, it really was just eye-opening for me from the standpoint that I hear a lot of directors, executive directors, talking about the frustration, the things like this, but I never thought about what an onus is put on the executive director to have to come and speak to the board about that.
Yes.
And so for you to describe that as an imposition, that never should be, because if they were, so I'm pleased with that response.
Good.
And I, my response or description of being pleased means that I was educated on that response, and I hope that you guys, as you're looking at this, that you're taking your notes and that you are liking the episode, and that you're marking it to share with others in the nonprofit space, and more importantly, for you to come back and catch it, because as she said, the answer might have been long, and even her other answers, they've been power-packed. And so you just need to take some time just to press that button and put it on pause and delve a little deep, take notes. And then I want to do this right now,
Okay.
Because as you see, Glenda is very knowledgeable, and I think you've already learned a lot to this point, but there's so much more that you can learn by getting in contact with her. So I would like to give you this time to share with the viewers how they can reach you and get in contact with you, depending on where they may be.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate
Yes,
that. Well,
certainly.
my phone number is 678-819-3783. That's 678-819-3783. And then I have a website,
Please.
which is gyhickscpa.com. So that's at www.gyhickscpa.com.
All right. So please, this show is all about focusing on the area of increasing awareness, funding, sustainability, and ultimately impact. And you've heard Glenda say it without even me nudging or saying a question on that with leader, but she talked about the sustainability, and that comes by the board taking on certain responsibilities and functions. And so there's a whole lot more, I believe, that you can get by reaching out to Glenda, and I ask that you do so because, again, we're sure you're out there with a great mission and a great purpose, and we would like to see that realized. And again, when you can have someone of the caliber that you've just listened to in terms of response, I believe you can find a benefit in that. So, and let us know. Once you reach out to Glenda, you let us know how things go. Let us know about the experience. We often get great feedback. To this date, we haven't heard any negative from the guests being on and people being very pleased. I want to continue on because I know, you've got so much. And like you said, even introducing yourself, I could take all day. This is a conversation that I would like to have with you going on all day. But let me hurry up. Now, you carry certain certifications, and in addition to the CPA and the financial and the licensing and all of that, but you're also a BoardSource certified governance trainer. Explain what that means.
Okay. BoardSource is a nonprofit in Washington, D.C., and they are the leader worldwide in publishing materials related to board governance. And I used their materials for years. And a few years ago, about 3 years ago, as part of their strategy to expand their reach nationally, they designed a program to certify individuals in their teaching model, their coaching model, with their materials. And for me, I just happened to visit their website that day and saw it there and thought, oh, this is exactly what I need to go through. Because although I had been using their materials, doing training, assisting my clients, people still knew me as a CPA who had not been my client yet and knew otherwise. And so I applied to the program and was accepted, and then had to go through a training process which didn't guarantee that you would be selected, even though you had been accepted, and was fortunate enough to graduate the program and receive the credential of BoardSource Certified Governance Trainer. So that's something that I was excited to go through and be able to utilize more of their resources and their teaching models in the work that I do with my clients.
And you're right, and I hate saying that like you wouldn't be right, but the fact of the matter is, I guess better phrase, I'm familiar with the BoardSource materials. In fact, one of the nonprofits that I'm closely aligned with, in fact, sit on their board, that was what we used to become established as a board.
Good.
But I did not know that they went through the process of as a strategy that to train trainers, to get involved with that. Very good. That's good to know. And again, listen to that, guys. And if you've never heard of BoardSource and you're out there getting started, I strongly recommend that you look into it, and not just look into it, but you have someone right here who is connected and knowledgeable with the process, and also reach out to Glenda. Find out her thoughts about how you should start, preferably before you begin the process of board selection, and find out how she might be of additional source to you there. I would ask this. we are coming up on the time, and I know,
Okay.
but you know, I'm going to ask my producer, you know, to be lenient with me this time because this is so good and rich, and I want to make sure we get as much as we can.
Okay.
But what are a few best practice tips you share with nonprofits?
Okay. Well, first and foremost, I would recommend from a board standpoint that they create a board governance committee. Not many boards have them. They sometimes have what we call a nominating committee.
Yes.
So when it's time to fill vacant seats or select officers, they'll convene a committee for that purpose. But as I mentioned before, and you reminded the audience of the lead generation, part of maintaining that short list is the responsibility of the board governance committee. So they are ensuring both that you have a pipeline of people to serve on the board or even committees, because a great way to vet whether someone will be a good fit on your board is to bring them first as a committee member
Right.
and not necessarily a
Right.
board member. But also they'll ensure that the board stays trained and up to speed on what they need to know and understand. So they take over that responsibility of ensuring that the board is being trained on understanding nonprofit finances or understanding how to be a fundraising partner with the development department if you're fortunate enough to have a
Right.
development
Right.
department
Right.
or your ED if that's who's
Right.
doing it. And they hold you accountable. They can administer surveys to the board as an assessment function to make sure the board determines, at least on an annual or biannual basis, that they're meeting their goals and they're meeting of their objectives, and that the board members are happy. Because a lot of times people will just stop showing up to meetings and you won't know why.
Right, right.
But if you had a conversation with them to find out, why are you no longer coming? Does it not fit your schedule
Yeah.
anymore? Have things changed in your professional or personal life? Is it not rewarding for you in the ways you hoped?
Yeah.
And so those questions just go unasked.
So would you suggest that a board governance committee be created at the onset?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. I would recommend that it be one of the standing committees.
Wow.
We advocate that you have very few standing committees because then you get into that syndrome of, well, we've always had it. Let's just
Yeah.
keep having it. But you would confine that to probably executive, finance, governance, audit, maybe program as well. And then everything else would be as necessary.
Wow.
So you can create it as an ad hoc and disband it when it's
Yeah.
done.
Yeah.
And you don't become overwhelmed with too many committees that you can't even staff
Yeah.
because you don't have enough board members or enough community folks to volunteer on a committee. So the governance committee is the number one best practice. The next would be a finance committee, so that you have 3 or more folks focused on the finances of the organization, bringing information to the board to help them understand where they are and how are they going to achieve the goals that they're setting, and what decisions do they need to make in order to, change the trajectory of the organization if necessary. Those would be
Okay.
the largest, best practices.
And I think those two in themselves are, tall order. And I think it would take them a long way,
Absolutely.
especially around being sustainable. Very good, very
Thank
good. Let me ask you this. Where can nonprofit agencies get assistance as they grow?
Fortunately, there's more and more assistance out there. The problem is, again, when you're trying to build it, it's hard to stop
Yeah.
and look for where you
Right.
can get help.
Right. It's like we say, and again, I go back to business, but even in my former life in education as a principal and leader, you feel like you're building an airplane, but it's already up in the air.
Yes, exactly,
Then you can't land the
exactly.
doggone thing. It takes time you need to do, but I'm listening.
Right,
Yes,
right,
but you were
absolutely.
saying.
Locally, the first place I would recommend is the Georgia Center for Nonprofits. It is our statewide go-to organization for nonprofits. They have a lot of certification workshops and trainings and opportunities for you to get information. I also recommend the Foundation Center here in Atlanta, which is a wealth of information, particularly for fundraising. They have a library. There's only 5, I believe, in the country,
right.
and one is here in Atlanta.
Right.
And so it's a great resource for information. In terms of trying to staff your board, the Atlanta Women's Foundation is a good location because they have a training program to train up women to serve on nonprofit boards. United Way has a program to train up folks to serve on United Way, to serve on nonprofit boards. And I have a program to train up folks to serve on nonprofit boards. So all of those are great resources. In terms of websites, independentsector.org is a great website of information, best practices, tools, assessments, resources. And there's a couple of others that are escaping me at the moment, but I can certainly follow up with you and you can provide it to your viewers. But those are the first places that come to mind because A, they're local, and then B, they're websites that I use frequently. Of course, BoardSource.org is a great website, which you mentioned. NonprofitFinanceFund.org is another great website for tools and resources as it relates to the finance function. But yeah, there's really a lot out there, but those are the ones I tend to go to first and the most.
And I'm going to say this because I tell people who come to us on our BizLinks consulting group side where we do consult about business development and productivity. But one of our biggest thing is that you have to invest in yourself before somebody else considers investing in you, and that's as a business, business. But let alone being a nonprofit business. And I say that because I hear all too often on both sides of those spectrums where people always want to get something for free. They want to find the free stuff. They want to find free. I mean, and free is okay. And it's fine. I mean, and it can do the job. But, be committed enough to invest in your startup, or if it's already existing, be committed enough. My wife often asks the question in one of her speeches. She says, are you interested or are you committed?
That's good.
Yeah.
That's good.
And I forgot the other half of that because it says something to the effect that because if you're interested, this is it. If you're interested, you only do it when it feels good or when it's comfortable. But when you're committed, you do it regardless.
Yes.
And so I say that from the investment side. I mean, Glenda has given some resources, and she's one of them. And yes, I'm going to say it, and she does have a price scale, for her services. So I'm just saying, guys, that if you're serious, regardless of where you are in the spectrum of operating a nonprofit, if you're a startup, again, reach out to her because I would encourage you save time. This is the way our philosophy is in business. If it's going to save me times where I can really do what I have to do by paying for somebody, give me that knowledge rather than I spend that time going out there researching all that. I mean, once you went through about 5 or 6 of them, you left me, in terms of the ones I was familiar with. Why would I not tap into you? And I know there were many more, but why would I not tap into you and acquire your services so that you can do all that, access that, and bring to me what I need so that I can begin to execute it and hopefully execute it with your guidance, So I'm asking as we begin to wrap up that, guys, as you continue to move forward with your organizations, that, again, stop being interested and become committed. And I want you to reach out to those who have the knowledge, who have the skill sets, and who can help you along this process to be more effective in reaching your impact. And so before we go, I do want to ask, because your area is training, those things, any trainings coming up, anything out there we can share with the people, so we know you can go to her website. But, I want to hear, any trainings that are coming up.
We have a few. We're excited with 2016 rolling out some new things, but we have the Certificate in Nonprofit Board Governance training coming up in March. So individuals who want to serve on boards or who perhaps already have but never received a formal orientation can come to that and begin to learn the true expectations of their time and the roles and responsibilities. We also will have, beginning in March, training for nonprofits who want to understand recruiting to their board better. And so those will be available at the beginning of the year. So we're excited.
Very good. And can they find those price tags and registration things on the website? Yes,
everything on the website. Yes.
Okay, guys, be sure to visit the website. Again, that is in
gyhickscpa.com.
All right, remember, guys, and again, share this episode with those who are in the sector. Share it with those who are in the business sector, because the information you share, those are great principles and strategies for operating business as well. So again, we thank you for tuning in with us. Glenda, thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
It
was a joy.
It was our pleasure, and we're honored, so thank you again. We want to remind you that you can view this show and all of our shows that are can be found on demand at www.bizlinks.tv. You can also follow us and like us on Facebook at www.facebook.com/bizlinkstv. And again, for the 500th liker, I guess is what it's called. Just possibly there might be something for you. So be sure to like us at our Facebook page, but also subscribe to our YouTube channel, so that you're always aware of where things are or when new episodes are published. And again, you can find all of our shows that are here on the network at bizlinks.tv, and we encourage you to support them as well. We thank you again, and we wish the best for you. And happy holidays. We know you may watch this at a time that is not, but it is the holidays coming up here for us right at this time. So we wish you the best and wish you much success. Thank you.